And out there.
How do you feel about being bullied so much, Abdul?
You should see, you should see how he gets on thinking.
Has he? Yeah. Abdul's the real bully.
Yeah.
Kevin's the victim. Yeah, exactly.
Stop playing the victim card.
Oh, hey Jeremy,
Stop playing the victim
some more
card.
fun. We should find my logo. That's funny. I have a video of him, like recording the screen, and he's like,
Shut up, really?
Yeah.
All this time you've been saying how good Aristotle is, but actually you admire Callicles and Aristotle.
and I screen recorded it, and he didn't actually know that.
Before we speak into our
Did we receive the Nietzsche
Oh, you weren't here then. Was anyone else not here on Monday? Oh, guys.
Monday.
I forgot, sorry. You guys probably don't have any idea how to answer this question either. How we go? Okay.
Oh, no.
Okay.
He's funny.
Maybe Kevin, can you tell Eric what the answers to these questions are regarding it? And Ryan, can you talk to Evan about what Nietzsche thinks about this without right now?
Like, I don't know, he makes it seem like important. So he doesn't even though he's very good, he's so good. He's also like the best friends with that. Maybe during his he's that weird. So when he went out, we just talked. It was so weird. What? No, it's called.
There. Like he's there all the time.
What? That's so weird.
Pretty sure that was you.
No.
Maybe you were talking about
I am not family friends with any people.
you said you were like a distant and he's there all the parties.
No.
It was
No. Was it Natasha? I'm just imagining. Hallucinating. Like every single one of them. Nanny? Oh, well, we started reading it on Monday. I like blanked out about that. Oh my god, whoops. What day is it? Wednesday?
This is me my perfect way. This is where you put in my best way. Yes.
There's some cicadas up there.
So you think so?
Herdman is someone within the
If you have stuff like in the morning, you can come late. If you have stuff like in the you have to be there. If you have stuff like after lunch, you can go at lunch.
Alright, we might come together. I didn't phrase this like a SAC question, but if it was a SAC question, or it was phrased a bit differently, what do you think the things it's asking you to, what are the things that it's asking you to identify about Nietzsche's belief? Or what did we write? Arich, what did you have for this one?
I was sure we have been ingrained to follow some thou shalt and unconditionally follow commands of morale.
Nice, we've been ingrained or brainwashed. Yeah, it's been ingrained in us, we would say. Yeah, or we've been brainwashed to believe these thou shalt be kind to each other, thou shalt love your neighbour, thou shalt exercise moderation in all things. Yeah, and what was the second bit?
And unconditionally follow commands of morality.
And unconditionally follow the commands of morality. Yeah, so that's why they're so popular. Nice, what does he think about those values? And I just did this. I think there's a weakness of the herd man. Yeah, nice one. It's like just following the herds, following the sheep. Yeah. What would he prefer? August? Suffering? An unconditional commander. Nice one. He'd prefer, rather than being a herd man, he thinks it's more noble to be an unconditional commander. Yeah? So he thinks that these values come out of, what's the mother of morality? What does he say? There's a quote on the very front of your document. He thinks fear is the mother of morality. So he thinks that fear is what drives us away from pain. Yeah? And humans have always existed in groups, in herds, and that's how we've survived. And because most of us in a herd aren't the leader, we've developed through time, almost as an evolutionary process, or maybe even exactly as an evolutionary process, this need to obey commands, yeah, to follow commands, to do what we're told, so that we can survive. And he's not very impressed with this urge, right? He thinks we have this other urge. What's this other urge called? To lead, an urge to lead, right? Or maybe more exactly, we have an urge to command, yeah? Which later on he calls the will to power, which is not just an urge to command people, but it's a drive to get as much power for ourselves as possible. Yeah? All right. Let's read from 201 then. So we're up to 201. We're going to skip 200. You can read that if you like. We're just going to read the BCE sections because we won't have time, unfortunately, to do the rest, but you can read the others if you like. People who haven't read section 199, you guys, I'd recommend you watch the video I've posted. Evan, have you got the YouTube link to the playlist for The Good Life? Sweet, so it's in there. Probably a half an hour, 40 minutes of our lesson is going through section 199. So I'd find that and have a read. Would anyone like to read today?
Yeah.
Kevin, you haven't read for a while. Just maybe the first bit and I'll tell you where we'll stop.
So long as the utility which contains moral value is solely conducive to the so long as the object is solely the preservation of the community and the immoral is sought precisely and exclusively in that which seems to imperil the existence of the community. So long as that is the case, there can be no morality of love of one thing.
Alright, let's stop there for a second because already it's pretty heavy going. Yeah? So long as the utility, what's the utility? The thing? The tool. Good, a utility is like a tool, but it means like the valuable use. Yeah? So long as the utility, the valuable use, or the goodness, yeah, which dominates moral value judgments, is that which is useful to the herd. Remember, if morality is just a made-up thing, made up by the herd of herdmen, let's just call them the sheep, right? If in society we're all just sheep bunching together, and we just bunch together so that we can do things more effectively. By the way, who does this sound like from the previous reading that we've read? Someone bunches together in groups to gain power. Right, Callicles doesn't like that it happens, right? But Socrates says that actually big groups of weak people are stronger than strong individuals. Do you guys remember that bit? Yeah, cool. So this is kind of what Nietzsche's saying. He's saying big groups of weak people, sheep he calls them, herdmen, are stronger than strong individuals. And they bunch together. Why do they bunch together? That's the question, right? So long as the object is solely the preservation of the community, yeah, if the object of morality, if the whole point of this value system we're making is the preservation of the community, and the immoral, what's bad, is sought precisely and exclusively in that which seems to imperil the existence of the community, so long as that is the case, there can be no morality of love of one's neighbour. This is a tricky one. He's saying that there's something that exists that imperils the existence of the community. Let's imagine that you're all in a big city-state in Athens, yeah? And back then you just had your wall, and you had the people on the inside that were part of your community, and you had everyone else on the outside who was going to come with spears and arrows and try and take your stuff, right? Do you think that they valued being brave, being a good soldier? Definitely, right? And partly because they have to. If you don't value being a good soldier and you're constantly being attacked, your community's not going to last very long. Does that make sense to everyone? So being a strong commander is valued in this community. I'm going to say that they value the wolf-like qualities in people. Yeah? They value being strong and tough, being brave, but also being dangerous. Yeah? Does that make sense to everyone? When you're being attacked, your community is going to value people who are dangerous. Let's get reading. Oh, so he says there can't be any morality of love one's neighbour. That's because your neighbours are outside the walls. He's saying that as long as you're being attacked by people from the outside, you can't afford to love your enemies. Because if you love your enemies, you'll die. Because they're not going to love you. Does that make sense? We all good? Sweet. Kevin, I might just take over, so I'll explain as we go. Supposing that even there was, maybe that should say, a constant little exercise of consideration, pity, fairness, mildness, and mutual aid was practiced in this imaginary society we're making. Supposing that even at that stage of society, all those drives are active, which are later honourably designated virtues, and are finally practically equated with the concept of morality. Yeah, later on we might make those virtues. But in that era, when they're being attacked, they do not yet by any means belong to the domain of moral valuations. Kindness, mutual aid, pity, fairness, mutual aid, these things, he says, they're not moral values when you're in a society that's being attacked constantly. He says they are still extra-moral. Extra meaning outside of. Yeah? Let's make some notes here, perhaps. So, as long as our community faces external danger, softer, milder virtues like pity, compassion, mutual aid, etc., might exist, but they will not be morally required or morally demanded. They are extra moral. Outside of morality. Can anyone think of something that they value that's not a moral thing that they value? Something that you like that's not a moral, you don't like for a moral reason. Food? In the enjoyment of good food? Nice. It's not a moral requirement that we have good tasting food, is it? But it's a pleasurable thing that you enjoy. Yeah? It's a drive that you have to enjoy good food. Yeah? But it's not a moral requirement that you find yourself eating good food. Or if you provide someone with food that tastes bad, that's not morally terrible. Yeah? Maybe someone would think though that you're a really bad parent if you only feed your kid porridge. What do you think? Or like really bad tasting porridge. Yeah.
Good tasting porridge is actually pretty good.
Good tasting porridge is pretty good. But let's imagine two situations, right? Avery isn't actually eating anything yet, but let's imagine that when he starts on solids, right? I start him on some food. And on the one hand, I have the situation where I give him very nutritious food that doesn't taste great. Now, am I being an okay parent? I'm being an okay parent, right? I'm providing food for my child. Maybe it's not as nice for him if he doesn't get to taste like really nice berries and stuff, but it's good for him. It's not nice, but it's good. It's moral, even though it tastes bad. But if I only feed Avery like the old off food in my fridge, then I'm being a bad parent, right? Does everyone see how that works? Because he's going to get sick from food poisoning. Let's say I only feed him the chicken that's fell on the floor,
Whoa.
right? That's going to give him salmonella, and he's going to get really sick and potentially die. And that would be morally bad. Does that make sense? Nietzsche is saying that in a society where you're being attacked, there are going to be these drives. You're going to have people who feel pity. You're going to have people who feel compassion for other people. You have people who practice mutual aid, like, oh, you helped me this one time, I'll help you another time, we can forget about it another time, etc. But these are not going to be moral drives. They're just nice things to do. It's okay to not pity someone who doesn't have enough food in this society, because you might have to have that hard moral attitude of a soldier. You might have to be a bit uncompassionate. Yeah, if you're going to live up to the virtues of this society, which, remember, they value being dangerous because it's useful for the community. Does this make sense to everyone? Cool. This is a society that values being mighty because they need people who are mighty. They need wolves. Yeah? Make sense? So they value wolves because they need wolves. Alright, should we keep going? All right, those notes? I'm not going to feed my kid off food, by the way.
Feed them French toast.
French toast. You reckon that's the way to be a good parent?
No, take him to Macca's drive-through.
Macca's drive-through.
Billy saw it.
Teeth yet?
No, feed him pancakes.
Once he turns 3 or 4, start
Pancakes.
introducing him to
Because
Macca's.
I have pancakes this morning.
My dad never let me go to Macca's because he said it was bad nutritionally, and he also just didn't like the global corporation.
We can have,
He thought that was morally bad to go to Macca's.
we can have salads at Macca's. So
Sorry?
You can have salads at
You
Macca's.
can't have salads at Macca's.
So
What,
vegans
like
can actually
tomato?
eat at Macca's.
Vegans can eat
One
at
tomato
Macca's.
and some lettuce.
How good is
Yeah,
that?
lettuce,
I
tomato,
suspect
and
vegans can
like-
potentially eat burgers at Macca's as well. Who knows what's in that meat? Alright, moving on.
Nick starts crying.
So they're still extra moral. An act of pity, for example. Did we all get the word utility? Utility means the goodness of or the value of, yeah? Alright, an act of pity, for example, during the finest age of Rome, when Rome was conquering the whole of Europe, was considered neither good nor bad. An act of pity was neither good nor bad. Neither moral nor immoral. And even if it was commended, if it was praised, then this commendation was entirely compatible with a kind of involuntary disdain. As soon, that is, as it was set beside any action which served the welfare of the whole, or the res publica, the wider public. Yeah? Ultimately, love of one's neighbour is always something secondary, in part conventional and arbitrarily illusory, when compared with fear of one's neighbour. What does that mean? Fear of one's neighbour is more fundamental to us than love of one's neighbour. Be cautious of your neighbour before trusting them. He's saying that if you exist in a society where there's danger, you can't afford to love everybody. You can't afford to value compassion. You have to value fear. You have to value strength of arms, having a good military, etc. And because you have to do that, that's a more fundamental drive within us, within our moral systems. Fear of one's neighbour, he says, is more fundamental than love of one's neighbour. Does that make sense to everyone? Once the structure, let's keep reading through, it'll make more sense as we read more of it. Once the structure of society seems to have been in general fixed and made safe from external dangers, once you're safe and there's no more enemies beyond the wall, it's this fear of one's neighbour which again creates new perspectives of moral valuation, new moral values. There are certain strong and dangerous drives, such as enterprisingness, foolhardiness, revengefulness, craft, rapacity, ambition, which hitherto, before, had not only to be honoured from the point of view of their social utility, under different names, naturally, from those who are chosen here. These are the things we value in a soldier. Yeah, being crafty, being a bit foolhardy, having ambition. But also mightily developed and cultivated because they were constantly needed to protect the community as a whole against the enemies of the community as a whole. These drives are now felt to be doubly dangerous. Now that the diversionary outlets for them are lacking, there's no enemies for the dangerous people to focus on, and are gradually branded as immoral and given over to calumny, disaster, to the immoral. The dangerous soldiers become the people that we're afraid of because the enemies don't exist anymore. And what are they going to do when the enemies aren't here? That's what the sheep start saying, Nietzsche is saying. Well, they're going to turn on us. This is just the way they are, right? So they start to say that these virtues that they used to value in their soldiers, those things are immoral now. The antithetical drives and inclinations now come into moral honour. Step by step, the herd instinct draws its conclusions. How much or how little that is dangerous to the community, dangerous to equality, resides in an opinion, in a condition or emotion, in a will, in a talent that is now the moral perspective. Here again, fear is the mother of morality. Let's underline that bit because it's really important. Can anyone summarise what this bit's about quickly? Nick? Can you summarise that in a sentence or two?
Not really.
What if I start you off? Once the society has no external enemies,
The dangerous soldiers become dangerous to their own.
nice, the dangerous virtues become immoral, instead of being moral, And these other virtues, these other things that weren't moral before, these become moral virtues. Being compassionate, valuing things like equality, Nietzsche is saying that they only become virtues when we can afford it. Yeah? Alright, let's write some quick notes for that. Once society say that was more than I meant to write. Anyway. So once a society is safe, they begin to fear the internal dangers. There are no more wolves on the outside. The dangerous people and qualities that before were morally valuable for protecting the herd now become dangerous to the herd. We've got to be afraid of something, Nietzsche thinks. We're always worried. So we have to be afraid now of the wolves within our society. So as these values become dangerous, they become immoral. If that's the worst thing that can happen to us, that's what's evil. That's what's bad. Immoral because the community is afraid. It reacts by calling those drives evil and making drives such as pity, moderation, and love of one's neighbour the most moral values. Even though before they were just nice things to do, like good tasting food. So Nietzsche's saying that our societies, when we decide what our morality is, he thinks societies have different moralities. And he thinks the moralities are basically a tool for the whole society to achieve what it wants. And Nietzsche thinks that the fundamental drive that comes out when we get heaps of people together, the common thing that they have most fundamentally for a lot of them is fear. And because fear is our most fundamental drive in a lot of ways, it's the mother of our moral valuations. What we're afraid of determines what we think is morally valuable. If we're afraid of the enemies outside, we value strength and soldiers. If we're afraid of burglars or thieves or people who are going to bash us up, we value loving your neighbour. We value pity, we value kindness. Which of these societies do you think Nietzsche would say we have? Yeah, definitely this second one. It's been a long time since Australia was at war, right? Is maybe one way to do this easily or in an interesting way. The CIA used to be able to torture people to get information out of them. Yeah, quite a long time ago, and they used to do it fairly regularly. Why did they have to stop? Human rights, right? Some people, especially in America, said this is just wrong. Apart from that, they said it's not effective, but they also just said it's blatantly wrong. You can't torture people to get information out of them. And they made it illegal. So the CIA is now not allowed to torture people for information. Do you think if America got invaded significantly by someone, can you imagine them repealing that law? Can you imagine them going back to thinking torture was okay if it was that or death for them? Right, because you can imagine that, Nietzsche thinks that this is going to prove his case, right? Like we're as moral as we can afford to be. We think torture is wrong when we don't need torture. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's torture everyone.
Mr. Clark is a wolf, guys.
Torture.
We got to evil yet? No. Fear is the mother of morality. Oh, torture. Yeah, does everyone understand the example? Torture example? Nietzsche would say that if we're being attacked constantly, we're probably okay with people torturing people in an underground basement to find out where the next attack is. Because we value our own safety over other people's right not to be tortured. Does that make sense? Cool. Can anyone think of like a counter example? What would someone who disagreed with Nietzsche say here at this point, with the torture example? What would they say?
But it's for our safety. It's still.
But it's still bad. It's still immoral, right? So a counterpoint would say that torture is always bad. And maybe sometimes people do it if they're worried for their safety, but that doesn't make it right. Yeah? Talk to the person next to you. Do you think torture is always bad? Or do you think that in some cases it's morally okay or morally good? Go for it.
You said morality is.
Alright, coming back together. I talked briefly over here, Andy raised the example of slavery, which is actually probably a really good example. If we apply this idea that fear is the mother of our moral valuations, fear is what controls our moral valuations, then Nietzsche would say that a society would outlaw slavery for its own people, but not for others. Does that make sense? A society might outlaw slavery for its own people, its own herd men, its own herd people, its own sheep, but not for people outside the community, if it needs them to get what it wants. Does that make sense? So we can imagine a society, let's take Southern America before the Civil War, right? Where they had a group of people, just all the white colonists, and then there was another group of people that were not part of their community, which was all the black slaves, yeah, that were made into slaves because the white people needed them. Does that make sense? And they didn't care about it being slave owners because those people weren't part of their community, part of their herd. Does that make sense to everyone? Well, Nietzsche would say that slavery was abolished in America because they realized that there actually wasn't that much danger anywhere else. And because there wasn't much danger, the bad drives, the drives that might hurt you, were things like being mean to other people, locking them up, whipping them, making them work for their whole lives for no pay. That becomes a pretty immoral thing if you don't need slaves. And so Nietzsche would say that getting rid of slavery, yeah, is part of this process of feeling safer and getting rid of the things that we fear. Yeah? Now, I was saying as well, Nietzsche is potentially actually very against slavery specifically, because he's very much about maximizing freedom. But we'll get into that a bit later. We good to keep going? Oh, quick check. Hand up if you think torture is always wrong. Hand up if you think torture is always wrong. Hand up if you think if your society decides it's fine, then it is fine. Yeah, interesting. All right, keep going. So, when the highest and strongest drives, is that where we are?
Yep.
When the highest and strongest drives, breaking passionately out, carry the individual far above and beyond the average lowlands of the herd conscience, the self-confidence of the community goes to pieces. Its faith in itself, its spine as it were, its self-belief, is broken. Consequently, it's precisely these drives which are most branded and calumniated, made into a disaster, made to seem as if it's the end of the world. Right? Nietzsche's saying that it's the lone individual rising above the herd that most freaks the community out, that most freaks everyone out. Yeah. Lofty spiritual independence, the will to stand alone, apart from the herd, great intelligence even, are felt to be dangerous. Everything that raises the individual above the herd and makes his neighbour quail with fear is henceforth called evil. The fair, modest, obedient, self-effacing disposition, the mean and average, who does that sound like? Aristotle. The mean and average in desires acquires moral names and honours. That's who we say is a good person. The person who has the average intelligence, the average desires, the average virtues. Eventually, under very peaceful conditions, there is less and less occasion or need to educate one's feelings in severity and sternness. And now every kind of severity, even severity in justice, begins to trouble the conscience. A stern and lofty nobility and self-responsibility is received almost as an offence and awakens mistrust. The lamb, even more the sheep, is held in higher and higher respect. Does everyone see what this idea is? Has anyone heard of this thing called tall poppy syndrome? You guys ever heard of tall poppy syndrome? It doesn't happen as much in this school and maybe in the society immediately around this school as it does in much of Australia. Tall poppies, have you guys ever seen a poppy field?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah? Poppy fields are amazing. Or a tulip field is the same, right? You see these amazing flowers and they all grow the same, and it's just this blanket of colour across, like, as far as you can see sometimes if it's a massive field. Does that make sense? But what happens is that some of the flowers grow too high and they ruin the effect of the field, right? Because it doesn't look like a blanket of flowers. It looks like a weird, like, patchy sort of thing. So what do you do to the tall poppies? You cut them down. You cut down the tall poppies to make everything seem the same, to make everything equal. You cut down the tall poppies. How could that be a metaphor for people?
More intelligent than us.
We cut down the people who are more intelligent, right? So tall poppy syndrome usually refers to differences in intelligence, but sometimes it happens with regard to sport or any virtuous, any excellence activity. Yeah. So typically, though, with intelligence, if you're really smart at something, what do we call you? That's negative. What's a name for someone who's really smart that's negative? Nerd, right? The word nerd is like tall poppy syndrome in a word. Does that make sense? It's like saying, you get an A+ every time and I always get a C. You must be evil. Does that make sense to everyone? Yeah? Hand up if you've ever called someone a nerd. I have.
Probably me.
But also myself. Right? So you'd say, you nerd, you always do well on that test, right? You say, you're bad because you're so good. Can you see how Nietzsche would react to that? Nietzsche's not going to like this very much, right? Nice. He says that because whole societies develop this virtue or this moral version of tall poppy syndrome, we start to cut down the people who are attaining what he calls spiritual independence. The will to stand alone, great intelligence, all of these things. If that happens, everyone starts to freak out. They seem to be acting more than I am. I'm starting to be scared because they're different and I don't like it. So we can't have that anymore. Yeah? If you are really good at a particular subject, you might have found yourself pretending that you don't know the answers. Because you don't want to freak your friends out or you don't want to make them feel dumb. Yeah? That's a symptom of this, Nietzsche would say. Yeah? Alright. This is also a quick note. This is actually a real feature of Australian society more than other societies. America doesn't have this as much as we do. America seems to value personal independence, ambition, achievement more than we do. But in Australia in particular, we have a real sense that you should be part of the group. Yeah? And if you achieve heaps, you should have enough self-awareness to put yourself down. Yeah? Putting yourself down in a funny way is actually a really Australian thing to do. Do you guys sort of know what I mean? Putting yourself down? Yeah? Joking that you're actually not all that? Yeah? Alright. Do we want to make some notes or keep reading? Notes? Alright, let's do tall poppy syndrome.
He's gonna pull a muscle.
Socks. He won't have stats that it's again. I know it's not.
He's not gonna start it.
Because
Probably doesn't matter. I'm doing the job. Bombing.
looks scary. Don't ever run.
What was that? Hey, go in. Go in. Oh, that was one. What's that? That was it. What do you got for me for?
Because you have an easy target for your eyes.
Yes, because you're taking me out.
Nice. I'm so involved in it.
Nick, your socks are too short.
Pick yourself.
My socks.
Let's do this.
What's wrong with my socks?
Good, these are short socks.
Who's?
Hey.
What's wrong with my socks?
Look at your socks up there. Your boss used to wear socks, you have to pull them up so they can be.
Knee your ankle. You're the sexiest thing last year. I'm just looking for
What are you rolling?
Okay, then what the hell was that? You said that we're class this day. You thought that was when you were people on my team did that. It's just like,
You can't hide out the back. Why doesn't have a left to do it?
sure.
He hasn't got a left, but he's got two though.
Doesn't even come over.
Huh?
Doesn't even come over.
Hey,
Huh?
what?
Doesn't even come over and stuff.
What are you gonna do?
Do we know what the word self-effacing means? It means putting credit away from yourself. For example, if you do a group project or you complete something as a team, let's say you play a basketball game and you win the basketball game 60 points to 20. And you scored 50 points. Right? And a reporter comes up to you after the game, let's say you're LeBron James, and you're like one of the best players in the world, and you've scored, well let's actually say it was 100 points and you scored 90, right? And the other team only scored 50 and you had 20 rejections, right? These are ridiculous numbers, you're an amazing player, and the reporter comes up to you and says, why do you think you won tonight? And Nietzsche says, the honest answer would be, because I'm amazing. But actually what you say, because you are self-effacing, you say, oh, it was a real team effort, everyone contributed, everyone was a valuable member of the team. Does everyone see how that satisfies the qualities of the herd, right? Now, actually, LeBron James is a bad example because he's been videoed saying that he's the greatest basketball player to ever live. And Nietzsche would love that, right? Nietzsche would love LeBron James.
Nietzsche.
Michael Jordan, did you know, if you talk to him privately, what do you think he says about who the best player in the world is?
Himself.
Of course he says himself. He thinks that he could beat anyone one-on-one, especially in his prime. But probably even now he thinks that.
Except LeVar Ball.
Yeah.
Except LeBron. Right? But if you ask Michael Jordan publicly, do you know what he says?
We'll say something.
He says it's disrespectful to compare himself to players that he never got to play against. He says it's disrespectful to compare himself to Wilt Chamberlain. Yeah? He thinks that it's in a way immoral, it's inappropriate to say that he's the best when he's being videoed by reporters. But if you ask him privately, when he's not being judged by the herd, he says he's the best. Yeah? And we know that because other people have been video interviewed and they were like, yeah, I asked Michael Jordan, he thinks he was the best. Yeah, it's true. 100% true. And so Nietzsche would not be as impressed by Michael Jordan as by LeBron James. He'd be pretty impressed by both because they're phenomenal players, right? And he values excellence. Nietzsche values almost above everything excellence, right? Achievement, spiritual independence, the word stand alone, great intelligence. And he's worried that our societies are dumbing down what we can be. Our societies, through this process of, because of their fear, are reducing the best among us to the average, to the mean. Does that make sense? I'm pretty happy with that basketball example. Just made it up just then.
Let's kick this off.
Alright, this next bit I find quite fun. Well, fun is it? It's mentally interesting, right? We ready to keep going?
Yes.
Cool. There comes a point of morbid, which means like tragic or you're dwelling on bad thoughts. Morbid mellowing and over-tenderness in the history of society. Over-tenderness, right? Too much tenderness. In the history of society, at which it takes the side even of him who harms it, the criminal, and does so honestly and wholeheartedly. Punishment, that seems to it somehow unfair. Certainly the idea of being punished and having to punish is unpleasant to it, makes it afraid. Isn't it enough to render him harmless? Why punish as well? To administer punishment is itself dreadful. With this question, herd morality, the morality of timidity, of fear, draws its ultimate conclusion. Supposing all danger, the cause of fear, could be abolished, this morality would therewith also be abolished with it. It would no longer be necessary, and it would no longer regard itself as necessary. Let's finish it off and then we'll have a look. He who examines the conscience of the present-day European will have to extract from 1,000 moral recesses and hiding places always the same imperative, the same drive, the same law. The law, the imperative of herd timidity. We wish that there will one day no longer be a thing to fear. One day, everywhere in Europe, the will and way to that day is now called progress. Nietzsche thinks that as society thinks it's doing this thing which it calls progressing, as our society progresses, we're just progressing away from things to fear. And Nietzsche thinks that's what society is. He thinks that part of this progress means that even people that harm us in the community, criminals, who do terrible things to us as the sheep, even for them, we start to value things like being compassionate, taking pity on. We start to say things like, the point of our justice system isn't to punish, in fact it's to rehabilitate, right? Sorry? Deter, right? We should deter crime. We should stop people becoming criminals. They're only criminals because of the way that they were raised, yeah, or the circumstances around them. Given the chance, everyone will be nice and fluffy, right? And the point of our punishment system, Nietzsche says this in a derogatory way, is to rehabilitate. Yeah? We're just trying to help them come to their senses. Be good people, not bad people. Yeah? Whereas Nietzsche thinks that actually what we're doing with our justice system is punishing people who make us afraid. Yeah? It's not about rehabilitation, it's about removing danger. We're not interested in the goodness of them, we're interested in removing danger for us. And then he says, supposing all danger, the cause of fear could be abolished, its morality would also be abolished. If there was nothing left to fear, Nietzsche says, because fear is the ultimate drive of herd morality, then there would be no herd morality. There would be no virtues. Compassion wouldn't be a virtue, pity wouldn't be a virtue. We wouldn't have immoral things because there'd be nothing left that we'd be worried about. Does that make sense to everyone? All right. How does Nietzsche feel about fear and danger and suffering?
Necessary.
It's necessary, right? And it should be embraced, Nietzsche thinks. Nietzsche thinks we need to embrace suffering because without suffering there isn't growth. We can't achieve without danger, without risk, without suffering. And this is why he hates this morality so much. Is because it's removing the thing that helps us have any sort of achievement. Without danger, without fear, without hurt, there's no growth. And so he thinks that as a society, all of our people are cutting down all the people that are doing the growing, and we're putting on a moral pedestal, we're saying you have to be this way, thou shalt, and you have to pity, you have to have compassion, you have to love one's neighbour, you have to find the average and the mean in all things, and our whole society will just reduce itself to what's boring and average and not growing. And this is why he's so frustrated. Does that make sense to everyone? Have I convinced you about Nietzsche? Do we all hate sheep now?
Yes.
Alright, do we want to write some notes on this last bit?
Yeah.
Yeah? In other words, the average Nietzsche says that if all this fear-driven herd morality progresses to its ultimate form. I always imagine the herd morality progressing to its ultimate form like Frieza leveling up. Dragon Ball Z. Ultimate sheep form or something. Progresses to its ultimate form, then all danger will be removed. And then, since there is nothing left to fear, morality
Oh yeah. I hope it has to be sure. Yeah.
It's like a blur. More from my remember.
But there's no keyboard.
I had a note in here.
This is a lot of notes for one section.
It is.
You reckon we can see really Russia?
I think Rubio's is better than Russia.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was our PhD, and then very instantly watched it. I was watching yeah. Then they took it down after 3 days. It's out. It's out everywhere.
Yep, that's fine.
Even though
you're an objectivist,
Yes.
you're a realist. Nice. We have our moral realists. Just for now, guys. Obviously, I don't expect you to have come to terms with the idea of moral realism versus relativism yet, right? But for now, and for this group, we're saying that here are the realists, yeah, and you guys are moral subjectivists. You think that it's just it's a made-up value, whatever. On page 251, the top group, I'd like you guys are answering the first 3 questions. I'd like someone to be a scribe, and I want you to answer them together. This group over here, you are the second 3 questions, and I'd like someone to be a scribe, and can you answer them all together? Make sense? Sweet. You'll need to sort of bunch up into a group, I think. Yeah, so maybe, I don't know, find a way to do that. Yeah. People at the end will have to move down somewhere. Cool, go for it.
you don't have to tell me what to write.
Yes,
Of course. This is like an easy job then.